Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Block. We've got episode 8 in the works for you right now. And like always, we're going to start off with a couple of headlines. And I want to get to the MLB to start with the two New York teams leading in the entire MLB, the New York Yankees and the New York Mets. Kind of unheard of to ever think that these two teams would be in first place after a couple games. It's pretty early on still, but the Yankees seem to finally get their offense going. Started off the season with winning their games by a couple runs here and there, but over the past couple weeks and couple series, they've really started to put on some offense. Same thing with the Mets. They've been dominant throughout their little hot start of the season, going 15-7. And now I want to break it over to the NFL draft here. We have first overall pick, Travian Walker from Georgia, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of people were speculating maybe it could have been the Michigan edge rusher going number 1 overall, but as of late, Walker apparently did enough to get the eyes and attention of the Jacksonville Jaguars to select him number 1 overall. And finishing off, I want to get right into the NHL playoffs. Going to start by tomorrow, I believe, and we'll have a bunch of great games to start off. And it's the best time of year when you've got the first round of the NHL playoffs, bunch of good teams going at it, trying to get past round 1 in the overall journey to get to Lord Stanley. So those are the breaking headlines to start, and I'm going to hand it right over to hockey with Sam and Harrison. Boys?
All right, thanks, Matt. Welcome into the Hockey Block here. I'm here with Harrison Dupree. We are here to talk about the playoff matchups for the 2022 NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Harrison, are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm glad to be back after a few weeks of a hiatus, but I'm ready to talk about matchups.
Absolutely, can't wait. Let's get into it. Our first matchup is Washington versus Florida. Florida, the President's Trophy winners this year, 122 points on the year. They have been looking absolutely dominant offensively. They're going up against a Washington team that had a string of injuries, some bad luck, I think, to finish 8th. They're a really solid team going into this playoffs. So, Harrison, what are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen in this first round series?
Like I've said before, I'm very impressed with the Panthers this year. I bet you're really happy that they won the President's Trophy because they are your favorite team.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm gonna pick the Panthers in 5 or 6 games. I think this should be a good series for them. I just don't think the Capitals are healthy enough for this series. Ovechkin, he has been skating around a little bit. He should be back for game 1, but will he be fully healthy? I don't think so. So, they have some other guys who are experienced with winning a Stanley Cup. But I don't know. The Panthers team has really impressed me this year, so I don't really see them losing or getting upset this round. So, it could go to 6 games. I'm going to say 5 games. I think Washington might steal a game at home, but I think Florida will get this round done pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting series for me. I think it's strength versus strength. They're both high-powered offenses and suspect goaltendings, but I think what Florida does, it just does it the same thing, just a little bit better. So I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard-fought series for both teams. The experience Washington has shouldn't be underplayed, but I don't think that Washington has enough going into this. But Samsonov, I think, is their starter now.
Yeah.
It's had a rough year. He's under 900 save percentage for the year. Rough start for him. So I would pick the Panthers in 6 games. So next matchup here, we have the Carolina Hurricanes and the Boston Bruins. This one I'm really intrigued by. This should be a really, really defensive series. The two teams, Boston actually finished first defensively in the league. So as a wild card too, it's a pretty good team. What are your picks for this series?
Well, the Eastern Conference Super is very strong this year. I mean, all these teams have potential to make a long run, but I think honestly this will be the best series of the first round, just play-wise. I think Boston and Carolina are a very good matchup with each other. They played each other in the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago, and that was a really good series. I feel like that will be very similar. I'm going to pick Carolina in 7 games. I think it could go either way, but I think Carolina is honestly a better team. They have a really good offense, pretty solid defense, some good goaltending. Boston has a pretty good offense and goaltending as well. Their defense is all right at times. I don't know. I just feel like Boston can overpower Carolina at times, but I don't know. The Hurricanes playoff experience, like their home advantage has been really dominant the past few years. Like their fan attendance has really gone up, and that helps you a lot in the playoffs, especially when you're a good team, and Carolina is a very good team. So I feel like that game 7 will be a very important one, and I think Carolina will edge over Boston in that game.
So this is definitely going to be a great series. These are two really strong defensive teams. I could see a lot of 2-1 games, a lot of 1-0 games, really.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be common.
Very defensive.
I'm going to pick Boston here.
Okay.
I think Boston's playoff experience, the perfection line that could be reunited at any time with former MVP Taylor Hall there just lurking, and the way they play defense with their 2 goaltenders, this Swayman and Ullmark. I think it's going to be a great series, but I don't know if the depth of Carolina's forwards is going to be enough of an answer for what Boston's going to show at them defensively. I'm picking Boston in 7 games.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. I just feel like Carolina's offense is a little bit too lethal for Boston. But like I said, I feel like it could go either way, and that's why I'm, when I'm not sure about a series, I always pick it as a game 7. So I'm kind of like this for this series. So that's why I'm saying 7 games, and it could go either side, honestly.
For sure. Next up, my favorite matchup of the first round, it's Tampa and Toronto. That is going to be a fierce series. I'm so excited for the series. What are your picks for the series?
So, this is my, I guess, upset of the first round. I mean, I know Tampa Bay is defending champions, but technically they are the lower seed. So I am saying Toronto does not get past the first round again. Yeah. Toronto has a lot of things good going for them, but their playoff experience is very lackluster. And Austin Matthews, yes, he had a 60-goal year. Great player. I don't know. It just seems like he always has these milestone years. It's kind of like McDavid. It seems like they have a few good players on their team that have milestone years, but they still can't get it done because they don't have a fully, developed team. I don't know. Their defense is really good. Their offense is really good, especially with their acquisitions at the deadline. Don't get me wrong. I don't know. Their goaltending just kind of scares me. Vasilevsky is very experienced in the playoffs. I mean, he's won 2 cups in a row. He's been a great goaltender for the past few seasons. They have Stamkos. They have everyone who has won a cup is on that roster on the Lightning. I'm going to pick the Lightning in 6.
Yep. Everything you said is 100% right. And I might live to regret this, but I'm going to disagree with you.
Ugh. I don't like that.
It's tough to pick against Tampa, but from what I've seen this year, I don't want to go against my gut, and that Toronto's the better team.
That is Panthers bias right there. That is Panthers bias.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit, but I think from what I've seen, Toronto definitely has the pressure to win, and Tampa looks to me a little exhausted. It's no knock on them. This is now the 3rd year they're competing for a cup, and 2 of those are shortened, condensed seasons. Of course, anyone would be tired, and I think it's time they catches up to them. Toronto really needs to win a series. The pressure's on, and I think they do it. I picked Toronto in 7 games.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I don't know. You picked the Boston upset. I feel like this one is a really good. I mean, Toronto is just historically bad in the first round, and I don't know. It's kind of a meme at this point. So I'm going to pick the Lightning. I agree with you that they're a little exhausted. I don't think they're winning the cup this year, to be honest, but I think they still have enough tenacity and experience to elevate themselves to not just the first round. I think they can make it to the second or even the conference finals.
It's absolutely possible. We'll see. Our last Eastern Conference matchup is the Pittsburgh Penguins versus the New York Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
This is a series I'm excited for, but I think it may end up being a disappointment just with all the injuries the Penguins are having. What do you see here?
Yeah, it's an interesting series because you got, two different scenarios. The Rangers are trying to prove themselves as an actual playoff team. And then you have the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are kind of an older team, and they're trying to prove that they can still make a push with all these old players. Like they're trying to, they have a lot of contracts expiring after this year. So they're trying to make that last run before they have to re-sign these players or they have to let them go. So it's a really interesting matchup. Pittsburgh has always been a well-rounded team. They've made the playoffs every year. They just haven't really impressed that much since they've won the cup in 2017. And then the Rangers haven't been really impressive in the playoffs the past few years. I think it'd be way more important for the Rangers to win the series just because they have, household names like Chris Kreider.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. Hey, what did I say? He scored 52 goals. He's a 50-goal scorer.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But they also have Artemi Panarin. They have Zibanejad, who I still think needs to kind of prove himself this year. He's had some really good years. He's just kind of had a down year this year. Shesterkin's played really well. But don't count out the Penguins. I mean, they still have household names like Malkin and Crosby and all of them. So I don't know. This is kind of a hard series to pick. I don't know. I feel like just how hockey works, and just because the Penguins are like historically good, I'm gonna pick the Penguins in the series in 6. No shame on the Rangers. I think they have a really good offense. I think they have a really good goaltending. I just think their defense will give up just a little bit too much in this series. I think it will be a lot like Boston and Carolina. I think it will be like 1-goal games, 2-goal games. It will be a close series, but I think Pittsburgh's home atmosphere is really good during the playoffs. Like I said, they've won 2 cups recently, so I'm gonna pick Pittsburgh here.
Yeah, I'm betting on Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang is always a good bet.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the injuries to Jari specifically for Pittsburgh, I think it's going to be too much for them. I've been very critical of the Rangers, especially their bottom 6. I think it's a huge hole.
Yeah.
But if this comes down to goalie play, it's going to be Shesterkin. He's going to win that. And the way the Rangers are playing right now and the way the Penguins kind of stumbled into the playoffs, I don't know if this series is going to live up to the billing it could have. I'm picking the Rangers in 5 games.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the West. Our first matchup here is the Colorado Avalanche, the number 1 seed, versus the second wildcard team, the Nashville Predators. Harrison, you're a Nashville fan. Tell me what you see.
I'm glad we finally get to talk about Nashville, but as you know, I'm excited that we're in the playoffs. I'm wearing my Preds cap right here. I got my Preds jersey behind me. I'm a huge Preds fan. We've had another pretty solid year. We've made the playoffs consistently. Honestly, since that cup run, we've been very consistent at leaving in the first round. Yeah. I don't know. I was kind of thinking about it today. Colorado was kind of in a similar situation as we are in 2018. We won the President's Trophy. We were the first seed in the Western Conference, and we played the Avalanche. And I mean, we beat them in 6 games. But the Avalanche still proved a lot of people wrong. And, they had Andrew Hammond, who played really good. So I don't know. This kind of reminds me of that series a few years ago. As you know, Saros is hurt. He's projected to be out 4 to 6 weeks. That's the whole playoffs. No matter how far we go. And we have some good players. We have really good defense. We have Roman Josi, who is up for another Norris Trophy title.
Great season for him.
We have Matt Duchene and Philip Forsberg, who both have broken the franchise goal records a few times this season. Matt Duchene, I think, scored 43 goals, which is now the franchise record in a season. So we have a really good offense. Our goaltending, though, obviously is the problem. We have David Rittich starting for us in the playoffs. David Rittich has been a starter before, and especially in the playoffs. He started for the Flames. I thought we were going to play the Flames, but we kind of blew it against Arizona the other night. So I was kind of excited for Rittich to play his former team, but obviously it didn't work out. But Rittich has been a starter before for the Flames, and actually he was a starter for the Avalanche series where they got beat. And his track record against the Avalanche isn't great. It isn't terrible, but I don't know. I'm gonna pick. We could get swept, but I think Nashville has one of the best playoff atmospheres in recent years in the playoffs. So I am thinking that they steal a game at home against the Avalanche. So I am taking the Avalanche in 5 games.
Yeah. That's pretty much in line with what I'm thinking. I don't know if Colorado's really as dominant as maybe their record or their billing shows, but I don't know if I think they have a lot to prove this year, and I don't think that Nashville has the firepower to keep up. So I'd also pick Colorado in 5 games.
Yeah.
So next series, the other 1 seed, the Calgary Flames, going up against the Dallas Stars. This is an interesting series.
It is.
Dallas, maybe not the best team, the only team in the league to get in with a minus goal differential into the playoffs. I don't know if Dallas is all that, but what do you think about this series? How long can they extend it?
Dallas and Nashville are so similar this year. I mean, we were neck and neck in points. So I don't know. Calgary, though, I don't think they're as consistent as the Avalanche. So I feel like Dallas might give them a little scare here. So I don't know. I'm gonna pick the Flames in 6. But obviously, I think the Flames are a better team. Their offense has been super good this year. They've been a very surprising team this year, especially for the Pacific, which has been definitely the weakest division. Definitely the weakest division in hockey this year. They've been definitely the most consistent team in the Pacific. Sorry, I got confused there. But hey, everyone in the comments are saying Nashville's getting clapped. I know. But yeah, Calgary, I don't think they'll have too much of a problem with Dallas, but I don't know. I have a feeling that Dallas will give them more trouble than the Preds will with the Avalanche. So I'm going to pick Calgary in 6. I think it could be a 5-game series, but I think I'm going to pick 6 games.
Okay. I don't want to disparage Dallas too much here. I like Jason Robertson. I like Rupe Hintz a lot. Both of those players, that's a really nice tandem to have of the future. But Calgary is just so good this year. If Canada's going to win a cup, it's going to be through Calgary. It's not going to be Toronto. I think this is an easy series. I think this is a sweep. Calgary in 4. I don't see Dallas with much of a chance at all. I know sweep pick. That's my sweep pick. Yep.
Yeah.
I know they made the cup a few years ago, Dallas, but it's just not. I don't believe in them. Sagan and Ben are falling off.
Honestly, the 2 cup runs, I'm not going to say the Lightning had it easy, but the 2 cup runs by like the Montreal Cup run and the Dallas Cup run were both super weird runs.
It was fluky. Yeah.
Yeah, super weird runs.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't see this as much of a series. Flames are going to take care of them pretty easily. But next up, my favorite series in the West of this first round, that's the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues. I think both of these are cup sleepers. This is going to be an excellent series.
I agree.
What's your pick here?
All right. So I think this is definitely like you said, the best series in the West. And just like Boston, Carolina, I'm picking Minnesota in 7 games. I think Minnesota has a very underrated squad this year. I think Kaprizov has had very good year again. Kevin Fiala, insane
Awesome.
this year. Definitely the Preds should not have traded him, but that's a different topic for another day. But and yeah, the Blues have a great squad as well. I mean, both teams kicked the Preds' ass during the regular season, so I got to see them play a good amount. But I don't know. I just think the Wild now having Fleury is a great playoff goaltender, and that's who I think will elevate them to win against the Blues in 7 games. Obviously, the Blues have playoff experience. They won a cup a few years ago, but I don't know. I'm going with my gut here, and I'm picking Minnesota.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It's Minnesota in 7 games. Kaprizov's just excellent, and with Fleury and net now, I think that's going to be the difference in this series. Despite the St. Louis Blues being super hot at the end of the year, and Tarasenko and them all gelling with Buchnevich and all that, they're a great team. They're going to be a tight series here, but I think when it comes down to 7, Fleury and Kaprizov are going to be the difference. It's Minnesota in 7 games. All right, last series here, the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings. Connor McDavid facing off against a surprising LA team, honestly. Happy they made the playoffs, and pretty surprising that they did. A little ahead of schedule for them. Really quickly, what's your pick here for the LA Kings versus the Edmonton Oilers?
I have a hot take for this.
Okay.
This series. This is my sweet pick.
Your sweet pick.
This sweet pick. I think the Oilers are getting it done and sweeping the Kings. That is my pick.
Okay.
I think the Avs can sweep the Preds, but for the Western Conference, this is my sweet pick, and I have reasoning for it. The Oilers have been super duper hot lately. Mike Smith has been lights out, and I know he's 100 years old, but he has been playing insane. And the Kings remind me a lot about the Penguins this year. They have some incoming guys in the coming years, but they have a lot of guys, kind of on the out. I just saw Dustin Brown is retiring. They have a lot of these guys from the 2012 and 2014 Cup squads that are leaving. So I think this is definitely a year where the Kings can prove that they're still playoff caliber. But I think they should still give themselves a pat on the back for making the playoffs. But I just don't think that – I don't know. I just don't think they're going to play on a playoff level. I think they used all their energy during the regular season, and I think the Oilers' fast offense is going to overtake them. I think Connor McDavid finally wins the series in the first round, and I don't know. I'm predicting a sweep here.
All right. I think you're right. The Oilers have too much talent with McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't know if I believe in the Kings to really be a true playoff team. It's a little fluky they got in. They have some talent for sure and some experience with Kopitar and Brown and Jonathan Quick having a nice year. But I think this is the Oilers in 6. I think maybe that Quick steals them a game or 2. But McDavid, I think, gets the second round with a lucky, easy first-round opponents.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to do it for us here at the Hockey Block. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to send it back now to Matt, who has some more football info.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, guys. Really good segments there. Love to hear it. I just want to give a little headline before we get right into football. Over this past week's NFL draft, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans, A.J. Brown, was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's right. The star wide receiver was traded for the 18th overall pick and the 101st. And then right after that, Brown signed with the Eagles for 4 years at about $100 million. Apparently, just through talks with the Titans, they could never really find a good salary that worked for AJ, and said it was a little low for his production that he's put on the field. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into football with my friend Ben Shoup. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, Matt? Glad to be on here.
Yeah, I know. It's good to talk football with you. I mean, we would do it all the time in high school, but now, doing it here instead of you talking basketball and stuff, we get to break it down a little bit. But kind of just want to get into it right away, man. The NFL draft this past week. What were your overall thoughts? What did you think of the draft? Think of it as a weak class. What are your thoughts?
I mean, going into the draft, I did originally think it was a very weak class. I thought once you get past kind of the third round, there wasn't too much great talent or steals there. And you saw a lot of people go in spots you didn't really expect them to go. So it was one of the weirder drafts you've seen in a while. Didn't know where some people were going to go, with especially even number one. Like, this was probably the first year in a long time that we didn't even know who was going number one. And that really kind of made the whole draft process a little bit more difficult for a lot of GMs, because you didn't know where guys were going. So it was an interesting draft, but I think a lot of teams definitely came out very, very well and had some great picks, some great steals in late rounds. And even though there weren't too many, but there were some teams that got some good steals.
Yeah, and obviously I would like to ask you maybe a little bit later on who you think, what team did the best throughout the entire draft. But I kind of want to start off with just the first overall and second overall pick. Travian Walker gets the first selection by the Jacksonville Jaguars over Aiden Hutchinson. I was actually kind of shocked about this. Obviously, over the past 2 weeks prior to the draft, they said keep your eyes on Walker. He could be potentially the guy to steal Hutchinson's I guess mojo and stuff of being that number one overall pick. And obviously it does end up happening. And he had a decent season at Georgia. Obviously was a national champion. Just a really stacked team though, so you can't really identify that with one player. But you look at a guy like Aiden Hutchinson too, was able to make the college football playoff with Michigan. I think he was the more dominant player, though, for the entire year, especially because I think he sees more one-on-one matchups or double team matchups, there. And I think overall there was less talent on a Michigan D line compared to a Georgia D line. So for me, I think it was kind of a miss by Jacksonville. I think they should have taken Hutchinson number one overall.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that. I really thought Hutch was gonna be the easy number one pick there. Honestly, I probably would have even taken Sauce Gardner over Trayvon Walker. Especially at the number one pick, knowing that a lot of GMs would not take Trayvon Walker, it was kind of a shock that Jacksonville didn't even trade out or trade back, try to move just back 3 or 4 spots, let somebody else get who they really want, and you can get more draft capital, because you would have been able to get Trayvon Walker at 4 or 5, maybe 6. But it's a miss. I think it's pretty well known. Although I do think he'll be a great football player, it's just not. He's not gonna. I don't think he'll live up to the number one potential. For Jacksonville, it's just another move that you kind of question and go, what's going on over there in Jacksonville? And
you would think that they would want to kind of play it safe, this time around with everything that's been going on in their organization, from their crazy head coach they had last year, and just trying to move forward and get over the hump of being that lower team they've been over the past couple of years. And like you were saying earlier, though, like Sauce Gardner, I would have taken him probably number 2 overall if Hutchinson went number 1. But we look at the cornerbacks and the defensive backs that were taken in the first round here. I mean, you have Derek Stingley Jr. getting picked number 3 to the Texans. I think that was actually a pretty decent pick. I probably would have taken Sauce Gardner before him, but I think the Texans really do need that solid piece at defensive back. And I think it's going to work out for them in the future. They still have a ton of building to do, as do the Jets. I think there's some solid picks right there, though. What do you think?
Yeah, I the top 5 was a little bit different than I would have guessed. Like you said, with Stingley going to the Texans, I would have personally taken Sauce over him, and of course he falls to the Jets, which is not a team that we probably wanted him to go to. But it was a little bit shocking. And then I was also kind of shocked to see Thibodeau go to the Giants at 5. I thought that they would go Neal there at 5, and then somebody like maybe a receiver like Jameson Williams there at 7. So I mean, there was a couple surprises, and I think a lot of the top teams got their guys. I think especially for Detroit, having Hutch fall in your lap and then going on and getting Jameson Williams at 12. I mean, you can't really get much better than that for them. But it was it was not how we expected it. Bottom line is, and Stingley went 3. Once that happened, it kind of messed up a lot of the draft order because a lot of people did think Sauce was the consensus number 1 corner in this draft in a very deep defensive back draft. But yeah, I mean, you saw a lot of cornerbacks go in the first round. The Bills picked one up. The Chiefs picked one up. I mean, you go down the line, there was a lot of top talent there, and I feel like Sauce really made himself known as the best one in the draft, and it was just a little shocking to see Stingley go 3 there over him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what draft day is all about. You really never know where anybody's going to go, and that's why we get all excited, ready to watch these picks. And it's funny to see some guys come out, start chirping different franchises. It's always just a really good atmosphere. But you were kind of talking a little bit there about Detroit, obviously getting Hutchinson and then getting a guy like Jameson Williams, who, me personally, I think he's the best wide receiver in the draft. I just got to think of these teams that basically won the draft. Maybe not necessarily just in one day, but the entire weekend going into it. And I've got a couple teams. I don't know if you've got some, but I'll list mine first. And I want to go to, honestly, the New York Giants. And, these may be some teams that I'm going to pick here that aren't necessarily ready to win, but they're setting themselves up to by what they did in the draft. Obviously, they got Kayvon from Oregon, a really awesome edge rusher. I think he's probably one of the best in the draft for sure. He's obviously a big, heavy guy, knows how to stay balanced on his feet, and can really move on the inside or outside. I think it was a great pick. But then right after that, they get Evan Neal with the 7th overall pick, who I personally think is the best. I think he's the best lineman, and I'm going to say the reason why is because I think he's got a lot of potential to learn more. And I think from a guy like Brian Dable, even though he's an offense guy, not necessarily related to the offensive line itself, I think he's got a lot of potential to become a superstar in this league. The one thing that they always talk about is, he really does bend over a lot when he goes to try and tackle guys or really make a hole in the run game. But I think it's something that coaching can really help him in the NFL. And having a guy like Brian Dable, who was with a successful team like the Buffalo Bills, now trying to establish his own culture in New Jersey. I'm going to say that. Yep, it's New Jersey. I think it's a really solid pick there at 7. And then in the round 2, they get Robinson from Kentucky. I've seen this guy play before live, and man, he's just so smooth at that line. He can really get some separation pretty fast. He can play slot. He can go to the outside. Whatever you ask of him, he can do. I think it's a good gamble to get him at 43. So I think they had a really good draft, even later on in the rounds too. But overall, I think the Giants are slowly taking a step in the right direction now that they have new management.
Yeah, I agree with the whole Giants take right there. I mean, you booster up both the defensive line and the offensive line. Start in the trenches. They don't know still if Daniel Jones is going to be their guy. I think a lot of people are leaning that he's not going to be the guy. But this wasn't a big quarterback draft, and they didn't reach. That was the best part. I think the Giants, they didn't reach. They got their guys, and they're starting that rebuild, honestly, the right way. And obviously, Dable came over from Buffalo, seeing it happen the right way. So the Giants, yeah, they had a really good draft. But for me, I'm going to go with another NFC East team, and I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they had a phenomenal draft. They didn't have many picks. They only had 5 picks, but they made that trade for A.J. Brown with pick 18. I think that automatically you get a weapon now for Jalen Hurts, and I think it was the perfect move for them. I think he's a big body receiver.
The one too with Devontae Smith too is going to be awesome, especially for you have a more mature type guy in AJ Brown who's been in the league for a little bit, and now you're going to have Devontae on year number 2. He's going to have a little bit more experience from the first year, but also just a little weight off his back. It seems like.
Yeah, well, it will open the field right up for Devonta Smith. I mean, you got a guy with that much speed, and then on the other side, you got 6'4", 250-pound AJ Brown over there. He can just throw it up to, and he'll go and get it. So yeah, I think it was perfect for them. And then in the second round, they went and got a center. They went and they got Jason Kelsey's replacement from when he retired, and he apparently had a lot to say about Cam Jurgens from Nebraska. And I think that's another thing that I love seeing teams do is go get their center. Go get them and make them the front of your line, the quarterback of the offensive line. And then in the third round, I think this might have been the biggest steal of the whole draft in Nakobe Dean. Obviously, there were some reports about his shoulder that made him fall, but he was a first-round talent, and he dropped all the way to the third round. I mean, a lot of people had him going maybe late first, early second, and for him to fall to the third round and the Eagles be able to scoop him up in the middle of that round, I think it's another great move, and I think he could really, really make a difference on that defense. And then they got they got a linebacker and a tight end in the sixth. Don't know how much they'll do for them, but overall, I love the draft. And in the first round, even they had another pick, which was Jordan Davis. Again, get Fletcher Cox's replacement after this year because he's going to be a free agent. He's getting older. Get his replacement. Let him learn for a year from him. I really think that the Eagles nailed this draft with what they had, and I think their future is bright.
Yeah, I mean, just Jordan Davis getting that big man, like you said, to replace Cox there. Nakobe Dean, too. I mean, like you said, he was a first-round talent just because everybody was speculating about his shoulder, and now he's going to have a chip on his shoulder because he was taken in the third round. And I think it's a really good organization for both of those players to go to in a scrappy type scenery like Philadelphia, where they're, fighting in the trenches. For basically every game. It's just their style of football. It's like when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, they always play tough. They may not have the talent, but they always play tough. And I think they really did hit it dead on with their draft. The trade, I think, was great. I was looking at their cap space and stuff for bringing on A.J. Brown. Really smart move by them. And to have him for 4 years, not like super long contracts so that, if, say, for God forbid, something goes wrong there, they're not going to be entitled to pay him for a long period of time. But I think it was a pretty solid draft for the Eagles as well. The only other team I'm going to mention today, which, I don't really want to talk about, but it's the New York Jets. I think they actually had a pretty solid draft. We always talked about Sauce Gardner being that top prospect, and he was selected 4th overall by the Jets, which I think it was a great thing for them to do because they need to start establishing their defense if they want to make some noise in the AFC. Now, like I said earlier in the stream, I'm talking about teams that are starting the process of getting better, and they are doing that also with the 10th overall pick in Garrett Wilson. I mean, I know I have Jameson Williams as my number 1 wide receiver, but this guy is easily number 2 for he's not that tall of a guy, not that big and physical, but man, is he an athlete? He can jump anywhere over the field, catch any ball thrown in his direction. He's just a freak athlete. Besides the speed, I think you're looking at a guy like Tyreek Hill and him. And then obviously later in the couple rounds, they take Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, the edge rusher, who I think was a pretty big steal for them to get at 26. And then in the second round too, I mean, a lot of people were speculating Breece Hall is the number 1 back, and a lot of contending teams right now were rumored to go out and select him, but the Jets waited patiently and ended up taking him at 37th overall or 36th overall, pardon me. And I just think they're starting to build a solid core. And I think Joe Douglas really established himself as having a makeup year and really just starting to get this Jets team, get their engines pumping a little bit because they're going to be able to start making this team around Zach Wilson. Obviously, it was his first year last year, so just bring talent around him, but also just start building defenses to stop Josh Allen or, maybe this upcoming Dolphins offense. So I think they really hit it on the draft there. I give them an A+.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on the Jets there. I think they did really nail this draft. I mean, you start off with Sauce. That's already one of the biggest wins in the whole draft. And then, Garrett Wilson, like you said, I also would have taken Jameson Williams over him. But, I mean, Garrett Wilson can go out there and he can ball out. I mean, he's one of the best in the draft. What most people had him at 2 or 3 in their rankings. And then, Breece Hall was one that we thought the Bills were going to go and get him in the first round. And he falls to the second round. And the Jets trade up and go get him. And I really think I like the draft for them. Jeremy Ruckert can also, I think, be a steal for them. I think if he can come in and make a mark, he can take over that number 1 tight end spot for them. So I think it's safe to say that the Jets are now no longer bottom feeders in the NFL. They have a good group of guys. I don't think they're going to be competing for the playoffs this year, but
I don't think they will
foundation.
for a couple of years. They won't for a couple of years. They still need to establish that foundation, and that starts with these draftees, and it's going to take them a couple of years.
Yeah. It will take them maybe, I'd say 2-3 years. But again, it's especially in the AFC East where you have the Bills who have Josh Allen, they're going to have him for years to come. The Patriots, they still got Belichick. You never know how they're going to be every year. They somehow end up being a team that's making a playoff push every year now, even without Brady. And then obviously the Dolphins are another team that people are saying don't sleep on them. Don't sleep on them. So the Jets, they do have a division that is kind of an up and coming division, I want to say. The Bills, I think, already cemented themselves, but the Jets are with this draft now saying, "Hey, we're ready to now rebuild the right way and get our guys and build our culture again."
Yeah. Well, those are the teams that I just wanted to cover real quick. I think they did spectacular in this draft, but obviously we were talking about one of the trades already, and I want to get into the trades that happened at the draft. And I guess we can kind of recap the trade with A.J. Brown, obviously going to the Philadelphia Eagles. For me, I'm more concerned about the Titans and what their process is for going forward. Obviously, a team that won the AFC in the regular season this past year was a one seed, got knocked out, and now they take one of their best wide receivers and ship him out. Obviously, lost Julio Jones too. He's still a free agent at this moment. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But what does this say for the Titans organization, man? He's already came out and said, they just offered something way too low for what I've been doing on the field. And I feel like most GMs that are being successful, most organizations that are being successful right now, they're going to pay their players. If they understand they're the game maker, they're going to bring them in. I know there's a lot of speculation of this is a new day and age where you draft your wide receiver. If he becomes a stud and you don't want to pay him, you just redraft, which obviously the Titans did. What are your overall thoughts on that, though?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a confusing move for me because I didn't even really see it coming too much. I know there was a little bit of talk about A.J. Brown, but he was not one of the top receivers to be talked about to be traded. So it was an interesting trade to me. I think Philly easily won the trade. I think if you give up an 18th overall pick for a solidified guy like A.J. Brown, then yeah, you won the trade. But they did get Treylon Burks as a part of that trade. They picked him 18th, who I love him. I think he'll be a great player in the NFL. He can kind of do it all a little bit, kind of like a taller Debo. But still, he's not A.J. Brown, at least right now. He could turn into
the
A.J. Brown.
physicality and just the size. It's so, you look at him across the field and you're just scared. You're shaking a little bit. He's able to make any type of play. The thing is, he's already got the experience. And for a team that I think, as of right now, like they still have a roster that can make a run at a Super Bowl if everything comes together. Obviously, they had a bunch of injuries last season. This one just was like I was scratching my head. Obviously, they did select. Who was the quarterback they selected? Why am I forgetting?
Malik Willis.
Yes, Malik Willis. Obviously, they selected him. Maybe that's a hint of them like possibly getting into a rebuild or something like that, or just trying to get something new, something fresh. I know Tannehill's been there for a little bit now. It just really just kind of mind-boggling just to see this trade go through. Like you said, though, Philly won the trade straight up. Really don't know what's going on in Tennessee as of right now, though. I didn't think they had the greatest draft. I like their first round pick, like you were talking about earlier. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of a head scratcher. And we've seen some players react to it. I know Taylor Lewan was like, on social media saying, what are we thinking about this Titans fans? Because I think he was like, what is going on right now? And another player that got traded and, serious conversation has been going on with the Ravens organization is Hollywood Brown. He gets traded to the Cardinals, and Lamar Jackson, who's had really no wide receivers, loses his best wide receiver in this trade. So it's kind of another one that you kind of shake your head and you're like, well, what are we doing here? How are we going to help a guy who has won the MVP before, was injured last season? Obviously, we want to get him back. He's should be, in their eyes, a top 5 quarterback, but he has no weapons. I mean, they tried the whole let's bring in Sammy Watkins thing. That didn't work out. They really haven't found a guy for Lamar yet.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go on the other side. I think that I love this trade for the Ravens. I think if you can get a first round pick out of Hollywood Brown, who I do think he's a great receiver in the NFL, but I don't think he'll ever be that number one guy solidified. And I know there was a little bit of kind of Hollywood wanted out of Baltimore. He didn't really love it there, but I really like it for Baltimore. If you can get a first rounder out of a guy like that, and then you go and trade back to Buffalo at 25, and you get Linderbaum, so you solidify that offensive line a little more, get your center. I liked it. I think that it can really change them, especially being a running team. It can help them down the line. And Hollywood, he had a lot of drops this past year. That's the big thing about him is he drops the ball too much. And they do have Mark Andrews still, but yeah, it's going to be a question about who's going to be on the outside catching passes from Lamar Jackson now. So it does leave a hole, but I like it because I do think they also had a phenomenal draft in Baltimore. So I like the trade.
Yeah, well, before we get into the last little segment here, I'll just say the reason why I'm not really all for this trade is because of all about culture and scenario and what you have in Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's been in the NFL for the past 5 years now. He's won an MVP. He's been to the playoffs. I think he's won only one playoff game in his career so far. Obviously, I spoke about him being injured last season towards the end of the season, but you just need to have some stability for this guy. And, if anything, some hope, just something for him to work with, every given Sunday. And yes, it is a good return to get that for Hollywood Brown. But at the same time, I think at the end of the day, you just need some stability and just something, a solid unit, maybe a 1-2 punch in Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, as you mentioned. Like having that for Lamar Jackson is probably something comforting because other than that, they have wide receivers coming in and out every other year. It's just something that's not consistent enough. And for a guy that I think has, a ton of credibility to be a good player and a top player in this league, I don't know if he's going to want to stick in Baltimore for the long haul if they don't start bringing solid talent in for him to work with. And I know they have a solid running game, really good offense coordinator. I just think they really need to get that big dog at wide receiver, just that number one, kind of like what the Bills went through with before they got Stephon Diggs. They had Brown there, they had Beasley come in, solid couple guys to work with, but then they had to go get that big fish. So I think they're still waiting for that big fish. Other than that, we'll see what happens with the Ravens going forward.
I will say this. I do think, though, the last thing about the Ravens, if they would have gone out in the second round and maybe gotten Michi or Sky Moore or somebody along that line, it would have made the trade look a lot better. But they didn't even go out and get a receiver the entire draft, not even in the 6th, 7th, no round. So that's the one thing that hurts them in this trade. But, I mean, I personally think they got a great return. Maybe you should have gotten a receiver before that, but who knows? I mean, Hollywood, I do know wanted out. So
yeah. Well, all right. So we'll get into our last segment. We'll go through it real quick, and maybe the Ravens can look for some free agents here that I've got listed. So just kind of the top free agents out as of right now. You've got Jadeveon Clowney, Odell Beckham Jr., Tyron Matthew, and then Julio Jones. Some solid guys out there still available on the market. And, I was thinking right off the bat, maybe a guy like Julio Jones could be a good fit in Baltimore. I know he's a little bit older of a guy, but at the same time, he's just that freak talent that everybody needs on their team. And, obviously I'm not counting out the Ravens for, missing the playoffs this upcoming season. They have a tough division. I will give them that, but I'm never going to count them out. They've always had some hard working teams underneath John Harbaugh there. So I would say that would be a good fit. And obviously Odell Beckham Jr., he's not going to be available for quite some time, but I think it's worth it for a type of team that is looking to win another championship to pick him up. He's really a special talent, and everybody knows that. Tyron Matthew, I think, he really was that leader of that Kansas City defense that has won them a Super Bowl, been to another Super Bowl. I think he's a solid pick. The one guy, though, I just can't get over, though, is Jadeveon Clowney. I think he's done. He really has not shown any productivity over the past couple of years of moving from place to place. Plus, I just think the guy is getting old. He doesn't have that same, juice he had when he was selected number 1 overall by the Texans years ago. I just don't think he's really worth it, or I would pay for him like ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, I've always said it for years, ever since people wanted the Bills to get him. I really don't like Jadeveon Clowney. He can stop the run a little bit, but he's not as an edge rusher. He doesn't get to the quarterback enough. He just like you said, the productivity is just not there. It really isn't. I think there was only one spot for him to go, and it's back to Cleveland on a small deal again. I haven't really heard much of teams being that interested in him. So yeah, it could be the end for him. But talking about the receivers, OBJ and Julio, the one team I do want to talk about that I think that either of them would be a great fit in is Green Bay. Obviously, they got rid of Devontae. Rodgers needs that guy. I mean, Julio's similar body type, similar type of player. Maybe he's the guy, but I also think OBJ would be a great pick up there. I think he'd be better than Julio there. And I think, especially once he gets healthy, he could really be a game changer for Green Bay and be that number one option again. So for receiver wise, that team, the Patriots, obviously another team that could be looking at OBJ. And I heard a lot about the 49ers being linked to Julio Jones. So there's some teams still out there looking for their receivers, man. And I mean, who knows? Maybe it's a sleeper team that nobody really expects. Kind of like there's the Saints, I know, Cowboys. They're always looking for a third receiver. Knowing Jerry Jones, he loves to get those guys. But I think one of these two will end up going to a contender and end up being a real game changer for someone.
So for me, I only see these two going to a contender. I don't think they're at that point in their career, or they are at that point in their career where they're not interested in getting the money. They've had that for years to come, especially a guy like Julio Jones. So I mean, you picking the Packers right there for a spot for him to go to, I think that makes tremendous sense right there. It's a really good spot for him to go. But other than that, I don't know. I think these guys are just so special. I think we'll see probably Julio Jones sign around training camp or maybe just before. Obviously, Odell, I don't think anybody's going to commit to him until we see that he's healthy. So I think that it's going to be some time before we see OBJ with a new team. But Julio Jones, I mean, he's still one of the best wide receivers in the game. It's kind of mind-boggling to think that he's still not signed. I think it would be a really smart move for any team to get him, but I think he's going to be pretty picky when it comes down to what team he wants to go to, because I think he wants a ring at the end of the day. But that's going to conclude our little football segment here. Thanks for joining me, buddy. I know you're going to do basketball next, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
That was awesome football talk there with Shoop. And one more headline at the end of the day here before we get into the basketball segment. And that is we're going to tennis, actually, believe it or not. Yeah, that's right. Wimbledon has banned Russians from playing at their events. And we've had some notable tennis players speak out about it, especially Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic, giving their opinion on how they shouldn't be affected over what their ruler and Vladimir Putin is doing overseas with the war in the Ukraine. So we're getting some voiced opinions on this subject, and it's pretty interesting to see what's happening. And some of the best players in the game right now are speaking up on it. We'll see what happens from there. But as of right now, Wimbledon is banning all Russians from these events. So with that, I'll hand it over to basketball, and I think Sam's going to join Shoop here. So boys, have at it.
What's going on, Sam? Thanks for joining me this week.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot's happened in the NBA, especially with the playoffs being now we're in the second round. So before we get into it, I want to just go over the teams that won in the first round, who beat who, and just maybe give a surprise team of the first round or surprise series of the first round. So in the East, first round, first seed versus the 8th seed, we got the Atlanta Hawks losing to the Miami Heat. Don't think there was too much shock there. I mean, a lot of people, I think, had Miami winning that one. And then we have the 4-5. Philly ended up winning in 6 over Toronto. Almost blew a 3-0 lead. I know that there was a lot of people hoping for that, but Philly did squeak by. And then we had the 3 versus 6 in Milwaukee and Chicago. That one wasn't too much of a series with Milwaukee winning in 5 games. So There's the 3 seed moving on, and then we have the 2 seed Boston Celtics sweeping the Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, which that might be the biggest shock to me, at least. Especially even being a Celtics fan, I thought it would be a 7-game series. I even put that in my first round preview. So in the East, what surprises you in the East?
I think one series that was really interesting was that Philly-Toronto series, because those first 2 games that Philly won, I mean, they just blew the doors off Toronto, right? And that third game was close, and then Toronto came back and won a couple before Philly just blew them out again in the second half of Game 6. So that series doesn't tell me a whole lot of what I expected, because at times Philly looked like the best team in the league, utterly unstoppable against a really strong Toronto team. Then other times they look disjointed. So I would love to see what this Philly team looks like if they get healthy again. I think they're either a real contender or they're out next round.
Yeah, I mean, and they have a really tough matchup against a really good defensive team in Miami, who I've been talking up a lot this year. And now we got Jimmy Butler doing what he just did to Atlanta that last series. But then on the Western Conference side, we have Phoenix only winning 4-2 over this 8-seeded New Orleans Pelicans, which I know Devin Booker was hurt, so a lot of people weren't too shocked that the Pelicans took a game or two. But I mean, Chris Paul really showed out there and got the series finished in 6 games. And then we have the 4-5 Dallas and Utah. Dallas ends up winning this one 4-2, even when they missed Luka Doncic for the first couple games of this series. They still pull it out. And then we got Golden State over Denver 4-1. I don't know if many people had anything different than Golden State winning that series. And then we have the Memphis-Minnesota series, which was one of the weirdest series I think I've ever watched. A lot of the games were pretty close. Not so much in the first half, but then all of a sudden it'd be like, oh, Memphis is coming back on Minnesota, and Minnesota blew a lot of leads in that series. So Grizzlies, they end up winning in 6, but it didn't really seem like a series that they would win in 6 with how you watched every game. So what side of this bracket surprised you?
Absolutely the Memphis-Minnesota series. To me, what that series shows me is that there's still a long way to go for Memphis. They didn't look like that seasoned playoff team the types that compete for championships. They really struggled at times against a hungry and athletic Minnesota team. At 7 seed, that I think most other championship contenders would have taken care of with how they blow leads, how they handle adversity. But so the fact that they took them to 6, I think for me shows that Memphis isn't ready just yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially coming in this playoffs, thought they're too young of a team. They're not going to be able to do it. They squeak out of the first round, and they also are playing Golden State now in this next round, and they've been looking real good this playoff so far, especially with Steph back. So what out of these next rounds, we'll go over each game or each series of the second round, give our picks real quick. But we'll start with that series of Golden State and Memphis. One game did happen today already. Golden State won by 1. It was a very good game. But who do you have in the series overall?
I have Golden State in that series. I don't think this series will be as close as this first game would indicate. I would take Golden State in 5 games. I think that their experience and their just togetherness and grittiness as a group, I think, is going to be too much for Memphis, especially when they go home to Golden State. I don't see them winning more than a game.
Yeah, I think especially with seeing how Memphis played last series, I don't think Golden State's going to have a problem with these guys. And they even didn't have Draymond Green for the second half of this game. He got ejected for accidentally hitting somebody in the face, which is getting a lot of criticism right now. But yeah, I mean, that death lineup of Curry and Clay and Draymond and Wiggins, I mean, it really is a death lineup. Like, it's pretty hard to go up against that. So yeah, I'm going to take Golden State in 5 games. I think Memphis wins 1, squeaks 1 out maybe next game at home. But if they can't win next game at home, they're going to be in a lot of trouble going back to Golden State down 2-0.
For sure.
The next game or next series in the West is number 1 Phoenix Suns versus the number 4 Dallas Mavericks, and this. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said this is easily Suns in 4. But now you still have the Devin Booker injury, and Dallas is playing some pretty good basketball right now on both sides of the ball. So who do you think's got the upper more of the edge in this series?
Yeah, Dallas has been really impressive, and Phoenix has been less so. Taking 6 games to beat the Pelicans, and the Pelicans I think are a pretty good team, but I don't think Phoenix is as dominant as maybe they were in the regular season. I could see this going 7 with just Luka playing out of his mind. You can't really guard him in the playoffs, so I could see this going 7. But I think with home court that Phoenix edges it out at home because Phoenix is such a tough place to play for a lot of teams. So I think they win this in 7.
Yeah, I think I'm back and forth on this series because I think Luka has had an amazing year, especially now with how their defense is playing.
Yeah.
And with the Devin Booker injury, it makes it a lot tougher. If Book was still there, I'd probably say Phoenix in 5 or 6, but I'm gonna actually agree with you and say Phoenix in 7. Unless in that 7th game, Luka comes out and just absolutely dominates and drops 40, 50, whatever, like he's been doing all year. So the Western side, they got a lot of great teams there left. I mean, it's 1 through 4, the top 4 seeds. So let's move over to the Eastern Conference, though, and we'll talk about the number 1 versus the number 4. We got Miami Heat, we just talked about a little bit, versus the Philadelphia 76ers. And there's a key thing in this series that Joel Embiid is projected to miss the first 2 games of the series, maybe even more. They're hoping by game 3 he'll be back. But how much does that change the series?
It changes a lot. If Doc Rivers knows what he's doing, he's going to have to change his game plan completely, right? He's going to have to change from an Embiid-centric offense to a Harden-centric offense. I think that's their only chance, is to maybe start Tobias Harris at the 5 and just spread the floor entirely. Let Harden run pick and roll. Let him do his thing. That's their best chance, I think. If you're playing Paul Reed and DeAndre Jordan significant minutes, you're not beating the Miami Heat. You're just not. So if Embiid can't make it back for this series, that's what they have to do to have a chance. If not, this is a 50-50 series, I think. I think with the way Embiid's been playing in this playoffs, he's going to be as unguardable as anyone is. So this can go 6-7 if Embiid's back. If not, it's a 4 or 5 game series.
Yeah, I think if Philly, in order to win this series, has to win one of the first 2 games and really take one there, because if they miss them in game 3 in the first game back in Philly, they're going to have a lot of issues. I mean, they're already going to have a lot of issues. But I will say this, Tyrese Maxey and James Harden, I think, can carry them to a win or 2. But, I mean, it's not going to be enough against a Miami team that's playing amazing right now. I mean, you got Tyler Hero off the bench, and then you got Jimmy Butler, who's dropped 45 and 31 or something like that in the past
36.
Last series. I mean, he's playing out of his mind. So I'm going to take Miami in 6 games, could be 5. I don't think it goes to 7. I think if Embiid starts this series, which he won't, if he was, I would have said then Miami in 7, or it would have been a 7-game series back and forth. But I think Miami comes out and they make their way to the Eastern Conference Finals. But on the other side, we have a very interesting matchup. We got Milwaukee versus Boston. This is, I think it's one of the biggest series of the whole entire tournament or playoffs. And you got Boston, who started the year off real slow, and now they are the 2nd seed. And then you got Milwaukee, the reigning champs. They still have Giannis. I mean, everybody knows what Giannis can do. So what are your thoughts on this series? And do you think the Celtics can take down the reigning champs?
Yeah, this is my favorite series of the round by far. I love the way these 2 teams match up. And the way we saw the first game go today, they don't have many answers for Giannis. Not that anyone does. But Giannis has the ability to be the best player in the world. We saw that today. What do you have, 26 in a triple-double? Crazy stuff. So I think this series, it hinges on the Jays, Jalen and Jason, being the stars they can be, because they have to take advantage of Middleton not playing. Giannis has to. They need to defer. They need to force him to defer to other guys. And on the offensive side, I think that's the key, is the Jason and Jalen duo need to be as good as they can be, because offensively in the half court, they're capable of driving offense. They just need to do it, because sometimes they struggle. That's what I saw today. They struggle a lot. So if this series goes 7, it's on their backs. If not, it's Milwaukee going in 6.
Yeah, I think Boston needs to go to 7 and make this series theirs. I don't think if they drop one more game of the next 3, I think it's gonna be Milwaukee, or 2 of the next 3. Then Milwaukee is gonna win this series.
Yeah.
But yeah, watching that game today, I mean, I saw they were combined. They were like 23 points on 7 for 24 with the 2 Jays over there in Boston, and that can't happen. I mean, Robert Williams is really the only guy that might have a chance to stop Giannis, but is he? I mean, you can't stop Giannis. It's just impossible. I mean, the man is 6'11". He can reach farther than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, it's everything he does. It's ridiculous. So I'm gonna go with Milwaukee in 7. I think they'll take that game in Boston, as much as it hurts to say as a Celtics fan. But I just don't think they'll have enough. I think the reigning champs will move on and go on to play Miami. All right, well, let's get into real quick. I want to talk about something we talked about a little bit here right now, the Joel Embiid injury. And he suffered an orbital fracture and a concussion from an elbow from Pascal Siakam. But I think the biggest thing about this whole entire situation is they were up 29 points with 4 minutes left in the fourth when he got injured. And Doc Rivers has gotten a lot of heat this year with how he's handled press conferences, with how he's handled the whole Ben Simmons situation, and it's looking a little iffy for him over there. So if Embiid comes back in game 3 or 4 and they still lose the series, is Doc Rivers going to be on the hot seat too?
Yeah, he's already on the hot seats. I mean, you could feel it. The pressure he's under, he's making decisions based on his job security and not just smart basketball decisions. Keeping Embiid up 30 with 4 minutes left, anyone would have taken their guys out. But he feels that pressure. He can't blow the leads anymore. So I think this is kind of the end of the road, especially now with Harden for Rivers. I think they have so much pressure, as much pressure as anyone in the league to win. And I think they may look elsewhere if this is a quick series, or even if it's not and Embiid plays. Because they have, in that Miami series, they have the best player, and they have also James Harden. So they should be favored, and the fact that they're not, I think, is dependent on coaching and dependent on the toughness of their players, but that's not so much Doc Rivers' fault.
Yeah, I agree. I think Doc Rivers could be on his way out at the end of this year. I think he's, especially with his track record of blowing leads or not getting it done in the playoffs with the Clippers, I think this is just another thing that's like, you just got our star player injured with 4 minutes left in the game that was in hand. So Doc Rivers, if they lose this series, I could see it being very fast within like the next week after they lose the series. He could be gone. But yeah, I mean, it's a big injury. It's a series-changing injury, and I think a lot of Philly is looking at it as, what are you doing over there, Doc? So we'll see what happens there. It's should be a decent series once Embiid comes back, but we got to see how they do without him. We'll go over real quick. We're going to go over the NBA awards. There was a few that have already been announced and some that just have the finalists out. But first up, I want to talk about the Rookie of the Year. We got Scotty Barnes winning the award. And there were some good rookies that were in the conversation this year. Do you think that Scotty Barnes should have won the Rookie of the Year?
It's a tough one. He is as deserving as anyone in any other year, but this was such a great year for rookies. I think it should have gone to Evan Mobley. You know, with the way he transformed that Cleveland defense, I know he was also with Jared Allen for a lot of those times, but he was so good defensively for a rookie. I mean, it was almost unheard of. So I think that should have been rewarded over Scotty Barnes' versatility. And he had a great year, and he's going to have a great career. But I think it should have gone to Evan Mobley.
Yeah, I've been back and forth because obviously Mobley missed some time this year with an injury. But I also think the other thing with me is Evan Mobley really helped change that Cleveland team. And you kind of knew Toronto had some guys that could make the playoffs and really do well. So I would have gone Mobley as well. But I also wouldn't say that Cade was out of the running. I mean, I think Cade showed this year that he was worthy of being the number 1 pick because that Pistons team is so bad, but he was really the only bright spot. He didn't shoot the greatest, but he still played well as a rookie. And I think Cade will be the best down the road, but he shouldn't have won Rookie of the Year. And I think it should have gone to Mobley. Due to time, we're just going to go over the six-man finalists and the MVP finalists, but we'll say the Defensive Player of the Year was Marcus Smart, Gobert, Draymond Green. There were a couple guys in that conversation. A lot of people weren't too happy about it, but I'll take it as a Celtics fan at least. And then we got Most Improved being Ja Morant. And this one got a lot of heat from people. So we'll actually go over this real quick. I think it should have been Desmond Bane. And I mean, Ja Morant gave it to Desmond Bane. He doubled his scoring and he shot the ball great throughout the year. But there were also some other guys like Devontae Murray in that conversation. So who do you think they got that one right? Or do you think it should have been somebody else?
No, it was weird to give it to Ja Morant because Ja Morant was already an all-star. I think it should have gone to Jordan Poole. I love his jump this year. I thought it was great, especially now in the playoffs it's showing. But yeah, maybe not the best choice.
Yeah. And then we got the Coach of the Year. We're going to Monty Williams. I mean, if you finish with 64 wins, you're most likely going to win the award. I think the only other option could have maybe been Ime Udoka in Boston because of the turnaround they had midseason, but it's hard to argue with 64 wins. But let's talk about the six-man finals real quick. We got Tyler Hero, Cam Johnson, and Kevin Love. Interesting three. I think one we expected to be there in Tyler Hero. So who do you got to win that award?
Yeah, it's Tyler Hero by a long shot. I'm a Heat fan, obviously. I've been watching this team all year. Tyler Hero has been really one of the more important players on this team, and he's coming off the bench. I think he has a bigger impact than those two guys, and I think it's a pretty clear win for him.
Yeah, if you average 20 off the bench, it should be you. And I think Cam Johnson comes the closest to even beating him, and he's still not that close just because of how well he shot the ball this year. And then Kevin Love's kind of, I think, just in there just to be in there. But yeah, I think Hero should win this award. Yeah, I just think Hero should win this award just like you do too. I think he'll easily win this one.
Yeah.
But last up, I want to talk about the MVP finalists. Now, Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid, they're the finalists. But for me personally, I think there's somebody missing on this list, and I think he should be the winner. And it's Luka Doncic. I have been saying it all year. You look at the team, right? And I know they've been playing better as of recently, but this whole year, he carried them to that fourth seed. What they have in that roster should not be a fourth seed team. I mean, he averaged 28, 9, and 8, or almost 9 assists, or also. So I mean, he was that whole team. He can take over games, especially in the West, coming in fourth with that team. I mean, it was similar to a Jokic situation. Doesn't really have much there because Jamal Murray's out, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, but Michael Porter Jr. He's also hurt. So to me, yes, Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid had great seasons. But I think it should have been Luka. But if I had to pick one of these three, I'm going to go Embiid. I think he really, especially with all the Ben Simmons drama and everything, he really carried that Sixers team. But yeah, if I had to pick, I would have picked Luka if he could win it. So, who do you think?
Yeah, Luka's a great pick. This was just a great MVP year. Lots of MVP-worthy seasons. I think for me, it's Embiid. You touched on it earlier. He fought that team through the Ben Simmons fiasco, and he was just unstoppable all year. I think for me, it's the most dominant paint presence we've seen since Shaq. So I don't think that should be undercut. He's had the best year of anyone to me. I think he deserves it. Bringing that team to a 4 seed, great, just really a great year from him.
Yeah. Lastly, we're gonna get into our top 5. We're gonna do it how we always do, go around the block for the top 5 players of the week. I will start off number 5, and this guy, it might not have been for this week, but it's just for the playoffs in general, and it's Jalen Brunson. I mean, he has really stepped up in a big way to help this Mavs team move on and past the Jazz and now into the second round. I mean, you look at it, 24-41 in that huge game that they really needed when Luka wasn't playing. You got 31, 23, 24, and 24, and it's not like he's shooting the ball bad. I mean, he has had 0 for 4 on April 21st from 3 and 1 for 7, but he has provided a second scoring option for Dallas to really make their mark in this league. So Jalen Brunson, he's on the list this week at number 5. Who do you got for number 4?
Yeah, real quick on Jalen Brunson. I'm just I'm really been impressed with him because he's become that second star that Luka has been needing, that Kristaps Porzingis wasn't. So I liked him coming out of the draft. I didn't think he'd be this good. So number 4 this week is Chris Paul. I think he's been just outstanding these past 3 games after struggling a bit versus the Pelicans in that game 4 where Jose Alvarado really gave him trouble. He bounced back in a big way. I mean, 33 points, perfect shooting in a closeout game. That's the Chris Paul we know, and that's the Chris Paul that's going to lead this Phoenix team deep in the playoffs.
Yeah, Chris Paul has shown he wants that ring this year. I mean,
Absolutely.
He's getting older. He wants it. And I know Alvarado is kind of making his life tough, but to come out then in the last game and go 14 for 14, that's unbelievable. Coming in at number 3, we just talked about him. It's Nikola Jokic. I mean, there's not much more you can really say about the guy. Look at these stats, and he's 3rd on the list this week. 25, 26, 37, 37, 30, 19 rebounds, 18 rebounds. There's nothing he can't do. He's the best passing big man. I think he's solidifying it as the best passing big man ever. And he can just do everything except for maybe shoot threes occasionally where he'll go 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 0 for 2. He's a former MVP for a reason. So he's coming in at number 3.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be the best performance we've seen in a losing series in a while, since maybe Luka a couple years ago in that bubble. He's been as good as advertised. This is why he won MVP. It's just the versatility, the way he's pretty much unguardable offensively. He just has so many options. Number 2 is Giannis. Giannis has been pretty much the best player in the world in the first round. I mean, they struggled in the beginning versus the Bulls. That second game was weird that they lost. But since then, he's just been really, really perfect, I think. And it shows in the box score, but it doesn't really show the full story, the way he just dominates the game on both ends. You can't score on him, and you can't guard him. It's the kind of player that everyone wants to be, and only Giannis and no one else really can be.
Yeah, I think the greatest part about Giannis is seeing the improvement in the jump shot and how he's just getting so much more confident game after game in it, which is honestly scary. If you can have a guy like that now shoot a little bit, it's going to be a scary sight once he gets it to really being a lethal part of his game. Coming in at number 1, though, we talked about him a little bit. I can't really say much more than what you're about to see with his stats, but it's Jimmy Butler. Miami Heat. I know he missed that last game, game 5 against the Hawks, but look at what he did in the first 4 games. 21 points on 9 for 15 shooting. That's just efficiency. That is the definition of being efficient. 45 points on 25 shots too. That game was unbelievable to watch for him. And then you got 20 points in 36 minutes. So he's getting a point a minute essentially. And it's not even just that. Even when he's not scoring, you see game 3 there, he had 20 points. He had 8 assists on top of 10 rebounds. So he's another guard that can really do it all. He can get steals. He had 4 in the game 4 where he dropped 36. And he really is just one of the best two-way players in the NBA at the guard position. And, I know he got to the finals a little bit ago, but he's proven like he wants to go back again and this time get the job done. So number 1 is Jimmy Butler. What do you think?
Yeah, this Jimmy Butler is the type of player that can be the best player on a championship team. He's the reason at this stage the Heat are championship contenders is the way he's playing. He really does turn it up from the regular season where he, looks slow at times. He really looks like a complete player in the way he can be right now. And like you said, defensively, he's on another level. He's just so good defensively. And it's not talked about enough how he just reads the passing lanes so well and gets these easy breakouts easily. And, Jimmy's just a one-of-one type of player. And the shooting now, too, it's funny how he was a terrible shooter all through the regular season, and now he's going 4 for 7 from 3.
Yeah. That Jimmy Butler, I used to hate him, and now he's slowly becoming a player I really like again. So that'll do it for our top 5. That'll do it for us actually at basketball this week. Thanks for joining me, Sam. Thanks for hopping on with me. It was a pleasure, and maybe you'll hop on again soon. So any last words?
Yeah. Thanks to everyone for watching. This was great.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to pass it back to Matt now. See you guys next week.
Sam, Ben, thank you so much for the insight on the NBA playoffs right there. Really good stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to go follow our social media at ATB_network. Lots of more episodes and good content. You can check out our articles and our writers and staff. They really do a good job here. So go check them out, give them some love. But we'll be back next Sunday at 6:30. So tune in.